In money matters, the local bourse has strengthened so far today as investors continue to watch developments from the Ukraine war. Hopes of a ceasefire have been abandoned and all eyes are now on any move by the West to step up sanctions. Petri Redelinghuys is the trader and founder of Herenya Capital Advisors, and he joins us to talk us through the latest market moves. A happy Monday to you. It may be gloomy outside. What does it look like on the markets?
Good afternoon. I guess a decent-ish kind of start to the week. Our all-share index is up just a scratch over 0.5%. Energy prices on cooling off a little bit by the looks of things. Well, Brent crude oil price was down a bit more earlier this morning than what it is now, but under a bit of pressure, which I think is some relief for most of us, I guess. The gold price slightly higher, which does sort of indicate that there still is some uncertainty, as you mentioned a moment ago, with regards to the situation in Ukraine. You know, there's a lot of conflicting news, and the market's kind of trading from headline to headline. And one moment you get a news headline that seems really positive, and the next one that's really negative. So I think sort of discerning the truth, and I'm sort of pseudo-quoting from somebody on Twitter here, we're trying to understand the truth, or, discern the truth in an age of misinformation, right? So it's really difficult to really get a good grip of what's happening, and that uncertainty definitely playing out in markets. But it does seem that we are off to a decent start. I guess for the week, the rand relatively, performing all right, somewhat stronger. Markets are generally more positive. We saw some positive news coming out over the weekend from China with regards to Chinese authorities sort of opening their audited books for their, Chinese tech companies that are listed in other countries. So that's really positive for the likes of Naspers and Prosus, as they are indirectly invested in the likes in Tencent, which is obviously Chinese tech. So there's some pockets of good news and pockets of uncertainty. So far it's a bit of a quiet-ish kind of slightly positive start to the week.
So a mixed bag, you'd say. Help us discern this. You mentioned it a little bit earlier on, oil prices inching higher in early trade, even as investors eyed the release of supplies from strategic reserves.
So yeah, those strategic reserves from the U.S. that are being released, it's a huge amount that they've, committed to. But if you look at the actual contents of those strategic reserves, I think it translates into something like 43 days of usage, right? So it's not a long-term solution because those strategic reserves will not last forever. But that is putting a little bit of pressure on the oil price. I guess we have to sort of wait and see what we've been hearing from OPEC, and we'll have to wait and see if they've changed their stance. But what we've been hearing from them thus far, is that they feel the oil market is largely balanced and there's no real need for them to increase production beyond the production increases that they've already sort of put on the table. So that does put somewhat upward pressure on the oil price still. I guess the next major move in the oil price will either be, will be dependent on what happens in Russia, right? Russians are now expecting payment in rubles for their oil and gas, and if that means that European countries are going to stop buying from them, so they've put the West in a difficult spot. It's either you pay us in rubles and break the sanctions that you yourselves imposed, or we don't supply you with oil and gas anymore, which is a very tough spot for markets to be in, or for countries to be in. So there's still a huge amount of uncertainty, and I think the oil price is still going to be very dependent on whatever the headlines is that come out of that region of the world, for now, at least.
News from back home, NERSA proposing an average increase of 7.47% in municipal electricity tariffs. That's from the 1st of July. Do you at least know the rationale behind this proposal?
Well, I read an article that sort of spoke about stuff, and I'll be honest, a lot of the stuff I'm not really very familiar with, but looking at sort of the average, the methodology used in calculating electricity prices to the end consumer, because of course municipalities are buying from Eskom and then on-selling it to the end user. So NERSA sort of sits in the middle as a regulator of what may and may not be charged. And essentially what's happening is that some municipalities are overcharging or using a different pricing methodology or pricing calculation methodology to other municipalities, and therefore we have inconsistency in what the electricity price is for different types of electricity users and that type of thing. So it's a bit beyond my pay grade, I won't lie. It's a bit of homework that needs to be done before I'll truly understand how these pricing models work. But for now, I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, if we see a 7.5% increase or just under 7.5% increase in electricity prices, this has been the modus operandi that we as a country have been facing for the last decade, right? And it's not necessarily going to change, if that makes sense, until we have a more reliable alternative, or we can have, private sort of entrance into the energy production market in South Africa. I don't think, we're all essentially being held hostage by price increases for energy prices, and overlay what's happening in the global energy market with that. It doesn't look very positive for the future.
Gemfields has booked a record $42 million from Emerald auction. Is that positive at least?
Yeah, that's a bit of good news. Gemfields is a smaller sort of miner that operates basically two mines in the gemstones sort of sector, so rubies and the like. And they've done really, really well. They're actually paying out a dividend to the first ever dividend as well, which amounts to around $20 million. So they had a relatively good auction. I mean, I know that it sounds like, okay, these companies sell on auctions, but generally in the gemstones and, precious stones market, that's how this works, So you mine a whole bunch of stuff, you put it together in an auction, and buyers come and place their bids and buy it, right? And an average price per carat is then sort of determined. So what's happened is during COVID, and this is where Gemfields, I think, deserves a little bit of, a tip of the hat, is because of COVID, people couldn't attend these auctions because they're generally in-person auctions held at some location. So they've developed an entire sort of online platform for their customers to be able to buy and view the gemstones in an online environment, as we were unable to travel. And this seems to have worked really well for them, right? And they've had this record big auction that they made. I think it was something like $257 million or something like that. It was really, really massive, and that is obviously goes a long way towards, $42.3 million, so 619 million rand from one auction, or one sale of gemstones that they mined. And the nice thing is they're passing this through to the consumer or to the shareholder, and rewarding shareholders with a decent dividend.
Thank you very much, Petri Redelinghuys, founder and trader at Herenya Capital.